In this lesson we are going to learn about taxonomy, which is the practice and science of classification. Why do scientists classify organisms? Well, there's three main reasons. One is to be able to organize living things into groups so the organisms are easier to study. Secondly, helps to identify relationships, in particular evolutionary relationships between organisms. It also helps to avoid confusion in naming and identifying organisms. For example, one popular marine organism, the great white shark, is actually known by several different common names throughout the world. For example, whereas we may call it the great white shark here in the United States, in South America they call it the gray pointer. In Australia it's called the white pointer. So really there is confusion among the naming of organisms throughout the world. Well, by using scientific names, scientists can identify particular species throughout the world. For example, to eliminate confusion, the great white shark is always called Carcharodon carcharias among scientists throughout the world. Taxonomy gets the name from the several levels that it has or that it uses to classify organisms. These are called taxons or taxa. Taxa are usually listed from the most general to the more specific. The currently used taxa in science, in life sciences, starts with a domain. There are actually 3 domains of life on planet Earth. And within each domain there are several kingdoms. And within each kingdom there are several phyla. And within each phylum there are several classes. Within each class several orders. Within each order there are several families. Within each family there are several genera. And within each genus there are several species. There are many different sayings that people use to try to remember the order of these things. For example, the method I learned was to remember the saying, King Philip came over for good soup. It helps you remember kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Now, of course, in modern taxonomy, we have to include domain there, so you can simply turn it into a question that says, did King Philip come over for good soup? So that's just how I remember. It may be something that helps you. Now, the other chart that you see on this slide is a chart that shows the classification of some common farm animals as well as humans. For example, if we look at the human being, we see that it is classified in the animal kingdom. And this is simply because it is a multicellular heterotroph. Now, because we are an animal that has a backbone, we are in phylum Chordata, and more specifically subphylum Vertebrata. Because humans possess mammary glands, that means that we would be classified in class Mammalia. The order for humans is primates, and many people get upset with this because they think that we're trying to say that humans are monkeys, but that's not the case. All it means is that we walk upright and have opposable thumbs. The family that we belong to is Hominidae. Our genus is Homo, and the species is Sapiens. If we compare that to the pig, for example, notice the pig diverges from us at the order level. It is an animal and a vertebrate and a mammal, but it is in a different order called Artiodactyla, which are the animals that possess hooves, including pigs, cows, sheep, and goats. The chicken, being a bird and not a mammal, diverges from us at the class level. It is indeed a vertebrate like us, but being a bird is put in class Aves, and then it continues there being in order Galliformes, and continues up to its species, which would be Gallus. As I mentioned in a previous slide, scientists use special names to identify each species. Well, a species is a particular group of organisms capable of interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. So in order to be considered, in order for 2 organisms to be considered the same species, they have to be able to produce fertile offspring. One particular example of this that we use to illustrate the biological species definition is a horse and a donkey. We know that they are two different species, although they can interbreed. In fact, when you cross a horse with a donkey, you may be familiar with the fact that you come out with a mule. Well, the problem with the mule is that it is sterile and cannot produce fertile offspring in itself. So this means that a horse and a donkey would be considered two biologically separate species. Now, each species on Earth is identified by a binomial Latin name. The first name is the genus that it is classified within. And that is usually capitalized when it is written. In fact, it should be capitalized. The second name is the species of the organism, and it is usually written in lowercase. This process of coming up with a two-name scientific name for an organism is called binomial nomenclature. And traditionally these names are written in Latin rather than in a commonly used language today. We have some examples on the screen here. For example, humans, the scientific name for a human is Homo sapiens. The great white shark is called Carcharodon carcharias, and the megalodon shark, which is extinct, is called Carcharodon megalodon. You may notice that those two sharks that are listed there have the same genus, and in fact they are very closely related, but because one is significantly different, would be considered a different species, they have a different species name. So the great white shark is Carcharodon carcharias, and the megalodon Carcharodon megalodon. The current classification system divides all life into three domains. The first domain we're going to speak about in the slide is bacteria, and these are single-celled microorganisms, so they are very, very small, and they're only made up of one cell. They are considered to be prokaryotes, which means that they have no nucleus nor any other membrane-bound organelles. The second domain of life on planet Earth is archaea. They are also single-celled microorganisms and are prokaryotes like bacteria. In fact, when they were first discovered, they were thought to be just a different type of bacteria, and we called them archaebacteria. But when they were investigated further, we figured out that they are indeed a totally separate group of living organisms. In fact, Dr. Carl Woese was responsible for studying their membrane composition or cell wall composition, as well as the ribosomal RNA of the archaea, and found out that it was really, they're significantly different than bacteria. In fact, as it says in the slide, it became obvious that they bore no close relationship to the bacteria, and in fact they're more closely related to eukaryotes than they are to other bacteria. The third domain of life is eukarya, and this would be the domain to which we belong. This domain includes organisms with eukaryotic cells. That means that they have membrane-bound organelles, including the nucleus, the mitochondria, as well as chloroplasts.